All right. Hey, everybody. My name is James Mulvany. Welcome to today's episode of Backstage Pass, where we're going to be talking about how to book really good guests for your show. It doesn't matter if you run a podcast or a radio show. Having guests is really important. Not only can you learn a lot from them yourself, they're also a valuable resource to create content for your audience as well. But a lot of people struggle when it comes to getting good quality guests. And there are 10 ways that I want to give you today. I share with you 10 strategies, if you like, to go and find really incredible guests for your show. And the better guests that you can go out and find, more high-profile people with bigger audiences or more interesting things to talk about, ultimately, it's going to rub off and it's going to mean that your show is going to improve. It's going to be a lot better. So without further ado, I want to just share with you a little presentation that I've created for you about how to go out and book good guests. So let's get it up on the screen here. This is all working fine. We've had a few technical issues today. These live streams, they never work exactly as you want them to. But we should be live across LinkedIn, right, on my LinkedIn profile. If you're not connected with me on LinkedIn, by the way, I did another live stream today called Working Lunch, which goes live every single Wednesday. If you want to check out my LinkedIn profile, if you go to create.co/LinkedIn, that's create.co/LinkedIn, that'll take you directly to my LinkedIn profile. Would love to connect with you. Always interested to have conversations and see what you guys are doing, what you're up to with your radio station, what you're up to with your podcast. Please connect with me on LinkedIn, create.co/LinkedIn. And we're also live on the podcast.co YouTube channel, on radio.co YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, you name it, all of the platforms, all of the live video streams. Rightio, so let's get going with today's Backstage Pass, which is how to find and book incredible guests for your show or your podcast. All right? Now, what I want to do, as I say, is go through 10 ways. So we'll just kind of rattle through them now. Clearing my throat. So, first of all, this kind of sounds obvious, but, you've got to look at who is actively promoting themselves. Maybe they're saying, they're an expert in a certain field, they're a guru, a thought leader, public speakers, even celebrities. You kind of get my drift here. Now, I do think this is a good starting point. It does take some time, and manually prospecting still works. If you actually reach out to people, on LinkedIn, on social media, go and find their Twitters and slide into their DMs, can be really, really effective strategy. And the good thing about social media is it makes it very easy to find these people. Ultimately, they've all got a message to sort of project or a sort of, something that they're after promoting, whether it's they've just written a new book, etc., or they're like running a business. But go out there and find people on social media. I think LinkedIn in particular is a really strong starting place because it seems that, as a platform, I think people are still very responsive on LinkedIn. A lot of people on Instagram and Twitter just tend to ignore that DM folder. But if you reach out to people on LinkedIn, it can work really well. So, number 2, authors. Now, Amazon have this thing called Next 90 Days. It's not something that most people are aware of. Because why would you be looking at Next 90 Days? But what Next 90 Days is basically just a giant list of everything that is coming up on Amazon, on the bookstore, over the next 90 days. Kind of sounds obvious, right? But here's the thing. If I've just written a new book on something specialized, something very, very specific, maybe I'm talking about social media or, I don't know, it could be something uber specific, like a new type of widget for car engines, whatever, okay? Amazon have got literally hundreds of different categories of books. So if you've got a podcast, no matter how obscure, or a show, no matter how obscure it might be, it's very easy to, number one, find people who are kind of experts in this because they've written a book in it. But also, here's the magic formula. They are looking to promote their book. They want it to reach as many people as possible. They want to sell as many copies of that book as possible. So go on to Google, just type in Amazon Next 90 Days. Excuse me. Obviously, all the different stores will have different sites. So the screenshot in front of you is amazon.co.uk. Obviously, great for finding books coming out in the UK. You could find your localization. But it's a really, really great tool to actually find people who, number one, know their shit, right? And number two, are looking to promote themselves. They'd be happy to be on your podcast. They're happy to go on your radio show and talk about what they've created and the book that they've written. Next up, networking, events, conferences. I'm actually off to South by Southwest in about a month's time. Here's me on the stage at South by Southwest in 2017. Now, I'm not as popular as Gary Vee over here, and I don't get mobbed when I get off the stage, but it was still a pretty exciting experience. And, you know, there's loads and loads of people giving interesting talks at conferences. Now, the best thing to do is rather than trying to, you know, go up to Gary Vee the second he gets off stage along with the thousands of other people and say, Gary, come and be on my podcast. No, what you should be doing is actually thinking about how to contact that person afterwards. So the key is really, you know, take some notes during the interview, take some notes during the presentation, and, you know, focus on what you really learned from it, how you kind of benefited from it. Find that person on LinkedIn, and obviously if there's someone super famous, it's probably like slim you're going to get a response. But of course, at most conferences, there are lots of people who aren't so well known who are also giving really interesting talks. And if you can pander to their egos and say, look, you know, I really enjoyed this talk you did on X, and I learned this, this, and this from it. You know, I've also got a podcast, or I've got a show about this. Would you consider coming and chatting to me on my show about your talk and about the contents of your talk and what you talked about? They're more than likely to say yes. Really good opportunity to find some people who've got great things to say. And the good thing is as well, if they've been on a conference stage, the chances are they're probably quite a good public speaker, because that's the other thing you want to get from a guest, is someone who's capable of communicating well and, you know, I suppose to some extent engaging your audience, being entertaining and all of that kind of stuff. Okay, so next up on our list, so we've got 3 strategies so far, is ask your current and past guests. Now, this is something that's kind of greatly underutilized, I think, because, you know, if you're doing well, you know, hopefully you spoke to some pretty interesting people. Certainly if you follow those first 3 strategies, you should have a kind of huge list of interesting people that you could potentially speak to, who will also be very well connected themselves to other people in the industry, or, you know, they might have some good ideas of who else would complement your show. And a lot of podcasters fail to do this because, you know, once they've done an interview, they'll sort of then say, okay, great to speak to you, you know, great to speak to you, Joe, or whatever. Well, that's it. We'll just leave it there. And, you know, they don't speak to them ever again. But I think kind of building on those connections, I mean, once you've had a conversation with someone, it's a great opportunity to build a relationship with that person. And, you know, if you just leave them cold, you never kind of hear, you know, you never follow up with them, you never get in touch with them again, they're going to forget about you as quickly as you'll forget about them. So stay in touch with your past guests, make sure you follow up with them every now and again, and also make sure you leverage their connections as well. So, number 5, approach PR and marketing agencies. Now, these guys are always on the lookout for publicity for their clients. And what I want to say here is, you know, think specifically about PR agencies that are focusing on one area. So, for example, there are PR agencies that might focus on food and drink, and they're literally looking for publicity opportunities for their clients in the food and drink sector. So they'll represent chefs, restaurants, that kind of thing, right? And let's say you've got a podcast about food, and you want to interview someone about, I don't know, the new kind of healthy eating, vegan trend, whatever it might be. Well, if you approach a PR agency that's got, you know, a roster of clients in that industry, they're bound to want to put their clients forward, you know, for publicity. So approaching PR and marketing agencies, finding out who their clients are, and also most of these sites will have their client list on the website. So you can kind of, especially influencer agencies, big long list of influencers that are all looking for publicity, and they're all fighting against each other to get, you know, more listeners, to get more followers on their accounts, etc., etc. So, you know, make sure you're looking out for these people, and these companies represent people specifically looking for promotional opportunities. So, number 6, relevant experts. And when I say this, it can kind of be quite broadly taken. Journalists are great, researchers, bloggers, people who are confident in writing and have something to say, you know, a message that they want to put forward. Also, guest bloggers. If you go on sites like Forbes or Huffington Post, Most of the articles and contents written on those sites aren't necessarily written by employees of those companies. They're either written by freelance journalists who are just paid on a per article basis, or kind of guest bloggers. And those guest bloggers will have tremendous amounts of expertise in specific areas. So really all you've got to do is go out and find articles of interest that seem relevant to whatever it is your podcast is about, and go and contact those people, especially if they've written for a site like HuffPost or Forbes. It kind of gives them so much credibility that, you can kind of be sort of assured that they'll be a good guest. But ultimately as well, it goes back to the thing I was saying earlier. They're trying to promote themselves. They're trying to get their message out there as well. So, presenting your podcast as an opportunity and a platform to do that can be incredibly valuable. There's also a service called Help a Reporter Out. I've seen a lot of podcasters recommend this. I've been on it myself. It has some benefits. It's kind of an old school interface, not very easy to use. The idea is reporters who are looking for people who want to give, certain insights on things will post stuff on there. Something to consider. There's also expert sites like guru.com, or even freelancing sites. You might want to check out Odesk, etc. Or you can just go and find blogs or even academic reports that are on topic. There's plenty of experts out there. You just need to know where to go and find them. So this is the next one, and this is one of my favorites. There are product launch sites. So there's things like Beta List and Product Hunt, which is what you see in front of you. And these sites are basically, directory listings for products that have just come to market. So if I've just built a software product, for example, when we launched podcast.co, we listed podcast.co on this site. And people can kind of get involved with the product. They can write commentary on it. But ultimately, all of these, members of this site are posting products that they've just launched. When you launch a product, what do you want? You want consumers to come and use that product. So they're all looking for publicity. So you have to go on Product Hunt, and it won't take you long to find a product that's kind of relevant to your podcast, your show. Get in touch with that person. The chances are they'd love to be on your podcast to talk about what they've just created. Next up, crowdfunding. Now, crowdfunding is one of these things, it's been around now for a few years, probably around 10 years. Crowdfunding's been a big sort of thing. And it really links back to, what I was saying before. I don't think there's that much difference between number 7 and number 8. Slightly different causes sometimes, rather than a built product. You maybe are going to build a product. But again, the thing is with a lot of these crowdfunding platforms, people have got targets to hit. So they want to make sure that they're getting the amount of money that they're trying to raise. And especially if they're getting towards the end of their crowdfunding campaign and they haven't hit it, they're going to be pretty desperate to get as much publicity and as many eyeballs on that campaign as they can. So Kickstarter, go and find Kickstarters that are ending within the next week. Say, look, would you like to be on my podcast or next month or whatever it might be? Do you want to be on my podcast? It's a great opportunity for you to promote your Kickstarter. I think it sounds like what you're doing is really interesting. Plus, also, there are some really good ideas on those sites, right? Kickstarter, there are some incredible products and inventions that have been born out of these sites. So, again, sometimes the people behind them can be really intelligent, very interesting, have some good stories to tell. So it's well worth checking out crowdfunding websites as a good source of podcast guests. Next up. Who has just got a load of my money? Right, so what I mean by this, funded startups always want publicity. And you can go and check out who has just received a load of money using websites like AngelList and various others. Where is my notes here? Crunchbase, that's the one I'm looking for. Yeah, so go on AngelList, Crunchbase, look at who's just received a round of funding. This means two things, right? It means, number one, investors believe in this company, which means that they're obviously onto something. I mean, arguably, sometimes a lot of the companies that get investment perhaps aren't onto something. They just manage to get investment. But that's a discussion for another time, right? But the other thing is they want to tell the world, because once they've received funding, it means their business is either going to grow or it's going to start growing very quickly, or maybe it has just grown very quickly. Ultimately, all of these people are going to be wanting to shout out to the world that they've just got a load of money, that their business is doing amazing things, creating some amazing product for, I don't know, cats or whatever it might be. And, they're kind of like feeling on top of the world. So go onto AngelList, go onto Crunchbase, find out who's got money, And a lot of them will also have, PR companies representing them. So they're not necessarily going to be dealing with you directly, but ultimately the PR agency who's representing them will probably leap on the opportunity. If you kind of deliver a good pitch and say why they should come on your podcast, you can speak to some pretty high up people, big CEOs of companies, that kind of thing. Right. So just to recap, go back to the beginning. Firstly, hit people up on LinkedIn, social media. Goes without saying, right? Number 2, find authors on Amazon's Next 90 Days. Number 3, networking events and conferences. And don't go up to the person straight off if they go off stage. What you want to do is, DM them and compliment them afterwards. 4. I'm losing track of the numbers. Number 4, ask your current and past guests. Make sure you're leveraging their connections too. 5, approach marketing and PR agencies, especially those ones representing entrepreneurs, influencers, and celebrities who are always looking for promotional opportunities, and go and get them on your podcast. 6, go and find some relevant experts. There are tons out there. Go and look at guest bloggers on big sites like Forbes and HuffPost, Harrow, journalists, researchers, bloggers, expert sites, you name it. All right, number 7, look at product launch sites. Things like Product Hunt. They're always looking for ways to promote their products. Number 8, crowdfunding, Kickstarter, Indiegogo, lots of people creating interesting things with cool stories to tell. Number 9, look at who has just got a load of investment from venture capitalists, because funded startups are always looking for ways to publicize themselves. Investors believe in them and they want to tell the world. So, what is number 10? I'm very excited to introduce you today to a brand new, easy way of booking guests. So you don't have to do any of the legwork that I've just mentioned. And it's called Matchmaker.fm. And the premise is very simple. If you're a podcaster, you can find your next great guest and discover industry experts who want to be on more podcasts. So these people are already primed and looking for podcasts. It's Matchmaker.fm. You can go and sign up right this second. Go and check it out. The other benefit for podcasters is you can see examples of the guests, their previous experiences on other podcasts, and ultimately contact them really easily as well. If you're interested in becoming a guest, maybe like me, you're an entrepreneur or you're an expert, and you want to get booked on more shows, and you want to find relevant podcasts that are actively looking for people just like you to interview, then go to Matchmaker.fm. You can even filter people based on category, so you know their areas of expertise, or even the available equipment, because I know what it's like as a podcaster. You want to make sure that your guests sound good like you, so you can choose guests who only have the best equipment available. Matchmaker.fm, go and check it out today. And that concludes today's broadcast. So, just to recap, you can spend a long time, going out and finding guests, doing the kind of cold approach, which doesn't always work, to find out that they're not interested in being a podcast. Or you can go to Matchmaker.fm, whether you're a podcaster or a guest. You can sign up instantly using LinkedIn, and you can find guests and connect with people and make valuable connections really straightforward and super easy. So, just to finish up then, we've got a few questions coming in, so I thought I'd take some. So we're back on. Yes, here we go. Right, so I'm just going to take a few quick questions. Daniel Taylor, how many follow-ups you should do before giving up on the guest? Well, I guess it depends how aggressive you want to be about your guest acquisition strategy. Ultimately, if someone doesn't get back to you after maybe 1 or 2 follow-ups, you don't want to give yourself a bad name. You don't want to make yourself look too kind of aggressive or too desperate even. So I would say maybe 2 or 3 follow-ups would probably be a good indicator that if you haven't heard back from them by 3 emails or 3 DMs, maybe give up on them. The other thing I would say is if someone doesn't respond to an email, try and reach out to them on a different platform. Try and send them a message on LinkedIn or send them a DM on Twitter, because ultimately sometimes emails are very easy to miss. Sometimes you might not have got the right email, or the email might have not gone to them directly. So, reaching out to them on a variety of platforms, is always a good idea. So how do we make sure, this is from Helen, how do we make sure guests give the promotion back? We can all share, but can't rely on guests to return the favour. Well, I mean, I think it goes back to, effectively sort of like you're doing a reciprocal exchange for, you're giving them a promotion. You kind of want them to promote your show. The way to sort of angle it, I think, is, especially if they're out to promote themselves, you need to make sure that you tell the guest by sharing it with their networks, their episode is going to get more momentum. So it's not just, please share it so I get more listeners. It's please share it so you, on this episode, get more listeners. Does that make sense, Helen? So it's just about framing and how you're kind of sort of angling it when you're sort of getting back to the guest. So rather than you must share this on your LinkedIn, you need to be cool about it, but ultimately you need to frame it so they sound like they're going to be benefiting by sharing it to their networks. Of course, you're going to benefit as well. Okay, so just before we go, we'll go back to Matchmaker. If you haven't already seen it, Matchmaker is a really straightforward and easy way to connect with your guests. Go and check it out. Go and sign up now. It only literally takes a couple of seconds. Matchmaker.fm. Click on that LinkedIn button and you can log in using LinkedIn and you can begin sourcing guests. Or if you're running a podcast, if you're running a podcast, you can begin sourcing guests immediately. Or if you're looking to be featured on more podcasts, we've already got, I think, over 100 different podcasts who are actively looking for guests on the platform. So go and check it out. It's available right now. It doesn't cost anything. It's totally free. So just before we go, have you got any further questions? We're just waiting here to see if we've got anything coming up. We are waiting for more questions. No more questions. Okay, right, okay. So, thanks very much for watching today's Backstage Pass. It's all been all about guests. Just in case you've joined us right at the last second, I would just want to bring this up again. Go and check out matchmaker.fm. It's a platform designed to connect incredible guests with high-profile podcasts and vice versa. All right, take it easy, have a great evening, and I will speak to you soon. By the way, before I go, if you're not already following me on LinkedIn, you can connect via create.co/LinkedIn. I do a live broadcast every single Wednesday on there, as well as this Backstage Pass, which happens once a month. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.